Hello everyone, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today for another installment of the research webinar series hosted by our team here at the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute, or MVL RI. The goal of MVL RI is to expand Michigan's capacity to support new learning models, engage in active research to inform new policies in online and blended learning, and strengthen the state's infrastructures for sharing best practices. MVLRI is a division of MVU, or the Michigan Virtual University, a nonprofit organization whose mission is advancing K-12 education through digital learning, research, innovation, policy, and partnerships. MVU is also the parent company of Michigan Virtual School, a supplemental state-sponsored virtual school. Michigan LearnPort, an online professional development portal for K-12 educators and personnel, and MyBlend, a blended learning initiative providing K-12 schools with resources, products, and services to personalize learning options for their students and improve student achievement. Before we introduce today's presenters and the topic of their presentation, an important disclaimer for our research webinar series. This webinar will be recorded and shared publicly. Consequently, anything shared during this webinar, including chat comments, could be shared publicly. This webinar may represent a presenter's or an attendee's personal views, opinions, conclusions, and other information which do not necessarily reflect those of MVU and/or the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute and are not given nor endorsed by MVU/MVLRI unless otherwise specified. Today will be the second in our four-part series on virtual school research needs. These webinars provide a way for K-12 online learning programs to introduce themselves to the research community and share their research needs for cultivating collaboration, for moving the field forward, and improving practice. The series started from discussion among members of the Virtual School Leadership Alliance, which is an association of the chiefs of multiple virtual schools that provides collegial support and collaborative opportunities for its members and member organizations. For that reason, we wanted to acknowledge the Alliance and direct you toward their website, www.virtualschoolalliance.org. That is a clickable link there within the PDF. So if you'd like to click that link, follow that link out and find out some more information about the Alliance itself. I'll now take a moment to introduce today's presenters. First, from Indiana Online Academy, we have Rhonda Eschliman. Rhonda is the principal of Indiana Online Academy, which is an advanced ed accredited online program of the Central Indiana Educational Services Center. Rhonda and her team have built an online supplemental program partnering with 259 high schools across the state of Indiana to offer over 80 online courses. She is a 2008 graduate of the National Staff Development Council Academy and is a former executive board member for the Indiana Staff Development Council. She is a facilitator for the Central Indiana Technology Leadership Certification and is the former president of the Indiana Curriculum and Instruction Association. Previously, Rhonda was the assistant principal at Carmel High School, where she worked for 20 years. Rhonda holds a Bachelor of Science in Business and a Master's in Educational Leadership from Indiana University. Also presenting today is Steve Kosakowski from Virtual Learning Academy Charter School. Dr. Kosakowski is the Chief Executive Officer and one of the founding members of the Virtual Learning Academy Charter School. Under his leadership, the Academy has grown from 700 enrollments to over 22,000 enrollments since opening in January 2008. As the Academy's first CEO, he oversees the implementation of the school's charter and the establishment of policies, budgets, and curriculum. Additionally, Dr. Kosakowski serves on the board of directors for the Nellie Mae Education Foundation. Prior to joining the Academy, Dr. Kosakowski has served in a variety of roles for multiple school districts, including Assistant Superintendent for Technology and Research, Director of Technology, Independent Consultant, Teacher, Department Chair, and a basketball coach. He has also taught graduate level courses at the University of New Hampshire, where he earned his doctorate. We want to welcome both of you and thank you so much for presenting today. With that, I'll hand it over to Rhonda to start us off.
Thank you, Justin. Can you hear me? Okay. I know you introduced me and talked about Indiana Online Academy, but I'll kind of summarize some of the things that we do and then talk about some of our research needs. We are a supplemental program, and we are a part of the Central Indiana Educational Service Center, which is one of 9 educational service centers in the state of Indiana. We partner with schools to offer online courses, and the types of students we have, cover the gamut of, of students. We provide advanced placement courses for schools that may not offer it, or for students who can't fit it into their schedule. We have homebound students that will, take courses with us. Summer school is our largest enrollment, and we provide summer school all over the state of Indiana. And we are kind of the go-to source for summer school for schools. We also have students who are traveling athletes, whose parents are on sabbatical for a semester, performing artists that will take our courses. And because we are accredited by the NCAA and our courses are approved, we have universities that will call us and have students take our courses so they can be eligible for athletic eligibility. I have a history of our program. One of the school districts in our region received a grant in 2003 to start an online program. When the grant ran out in 2005, they didn't want the program anymore and handed it over to us. We had 39 student enrollments, 9 teachers, and 11 courses that were developed. Since then, we've grown to over 15,000 students. That was the school year last year, 231 teachers, and 78 courses, and we're in the process of developing 10 more, so we'll be actually close to 80. We have a couple that will be finished also, or excuse me, 90 courses. So this is something we've grown on, just in a small office in an educational service center, and we've managed to go statewide and partner with 259 schools around the state of Indiana. We only offer high school courses, but we are looking at maybe offering some middle school courses also. Here's a growth chart that shows our growth in enrollment, and as you can see, it's just kind of gone crazy over the last few years, which I think shows that there is a definite need for quality online courses that students can have easy access to. With that growth, we started with a staff of 2. We now have a internal staff of 11 people, and you have growing pains, and I think that's where we could use the research community to help us with some of the things we're struggling with and some of the questions that we have in order to make our program better. Another aspect of our program that we're very active in is professional development, and we offer technology professional development all over the state of Indiana. What we're finding is there is such a need for schools for professional development in this area. We can hardly keep up with the demand. So I just hired 2 new staff members just for professional development. We tie that in with Indiana Online Academy as far as our knowledge of course development and online teaching, blended learning, and so on, and we go out and we also present to schools, help schools with these. We even help schools develop their own programs. So we're kind of a 2-part program, the online courses and the professional development side, which we called IOA eDesk. When I was first asked what our research needs were, I kind of had a hard time with this, because as something comes up, we will look into it and try and figure things out. And I hadn't really sat down and said, if we could really have help with research, what would it be? And we recently went through our Advanced Ed accreditation for the 2nd time, and we had required actions that we needed to do. And one of them was to determine student success at the next level. And we have always had, anecdotally, students will say, I was well prepared. Schools will say, the students were well prepared when they came, or they came back to school and took the next level of courses, but we really have no data on that, and we're not really sure how to go about collecting that data other than through maybe a survey. Because we're a supplemental program, most of our students only take one, maybe two courses with us. They're usually in the summer. And other than end-of-course surveys that we give the students before we allow them to take their final exam, it's very difficult to get data from the students, as they progress back at their high school. But this is a required action from Advanced Ed that we need to figure out how we determine success at the next level. And, because they're not our full-time students, we're trying to figure out how to do that. So this is one area we can definitely need help, whether it would be surveying the schools that the students go back to, getting a hold of the students. We're open to any suggestions on this, but this is something that we will be required to do for Advanced Ed. Another area that we have questions about is how does the rigor of our courses compare to other programs, and is this rigor affecting student enrollment in our courses? Anecdotally, we hear that our courses are hard, that they're rigorous, and for some of our rural schools, sometimes the students struggle with the material. We intentionally want to make our courses rigorous because, I think students think if this is an easy A, I'll take an online course, and it's not that way at all when they get into it. We want our courses to be just as rigorous as what they would get in a face-to-face classroom. When we're competing against programs such as Plato or Novanet, some of the credit recovery programs, schools are finding that we are much more difficult, and it's harder for students in the credit recovery area to make up credits. We want to keep our rigor, but we also want to make sure they're not too difficult that it's holding back enrollments in our courses or holding back students from getting credits. Our pass rate is 88% overall for the year, but we do allow our students to drop the course within the first 2 weeks. And we do get, quite a few students who opt to drop in the first 2 weeks after they've gotten into the course. We would love to know how the rigor of our courses compare to other programs, such as a Plato or Novanet or purchased programs that schools can buy, and does that help or hurt our enrollment? When we look at, we have a Counselor Connect, which is an online counselor a chat room basically for the state, and we hear over and over again, Indiana Online Academy courses are very rigorous, but that can be also hurt, are we too rigorous? So that's something that we would love to know how we compare. Another area is because we have students that are feeding into us from all over the state, we have them coming from all kinds of backgrounds. Some of our metropolitan schools have one-to-one initiatives, or they've implemented bring your own device. And then we also have students who have very little access, and they're doing the courses from home in their after hours. And we have never done any research to know whether students do better in our classes if they come from technology-rich schools, or do we provide enough background and training for them that when they enter our course just from, say, access from home or going to a library or a media center in their school, are they going to perform as well as students who have come from technology-rich backgrounds? And again, this is something, the kind of data we would like to track on the demographics and how we can help more of our rural schools, and does it make a difference in the students, how the students do in their achievement. The last topic that we need help with is in our professional development offerings. We offer a wide range of professional development for, including face-to-face, webinars, and so on, and we try and figure out what we think our schools will want, but we don't we do surveys at the end of the professional development, but we would really love to know, are our professional development offerings meeting the needs of our schools around the state? Again, you know, we can anecdotally say, oh yeah, they love it, but we don't have that hard data to say we're meeting it, how could we do it better, what other medium could we reach teachers and administrators around the state to help them with their professional development needs. So these are 4 areas that we focused in on. There are, oh God, you know, endless areas where we could help, we could use help with research. And you know, as we grow, like I said, we're growing so quickly that it would really be nice to have data to see we're doing things correctly, we're not doing things correctly, how we match up with other programs, and so on. This is my contact information, including my phone number and my email address and our website for the school. And thank you. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Rhonda. It looks like there's a question there regarding the indicators of rigor, and in other words, how you would measure rigor, if you wanted to address that one.
We would, right now as we're developing our courses, our newer courses, we are mapping them to the state standards, and then we're also using the Quality Matters rubric to make sure that we are meeting the standards and what depth of knowledge are the indicators that we're matching with the standards. So we're trying to match our new courses with depth of knowledge for each of the assessments and for each of the units and the standards that we cover. We don't have that mapped for our other courses, but we look at rigor of how we match up with the standards, the state standards, and Indiana has brand new standards. We are not a Common Core state. We've elected to develop our own standards, so we're having to redevelop all of our courses to meet the new Indiana standard. And we're trying to map depth of knowledge with each of our units and each of our courses. So that's how we're measuring rigor, and also student, you know, all of the Quality Matters indicators as far as student involvement and collaboration and teacher involvement.
Thank you very much. We'll give a couple seconds to see if anyone else has any other questions in the chat box. If you do have a question, folks, go ahead and type that into the chat box and we'll make sure our presenters address those questions. With that, we'll go ahead and hand it over to Steve. And Rhonda, I'm sorry, if you did want to address the comment there that Dawn made, feel free. But it looks like you might be able to do that through the chat as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Steve, and he can tell us a little bit about his own school.
Thank you very much. And Rhonda, that was a great presentation, and certainly a lot of wonderful things going on in Indiana. And I think when I get to the my portion of the presentation regarding research, I should just say, well, what Rhonda said. Lots of great questions, and I think we would share a lot of those same needs as well. To tell you a bit about VLACS, we are a statewide charter school in New Hampshire. In addition to being a charter and a public school, we're also a nonprofit, and we also accept students from out of state. If students are in state, they come to our school free of charge, and it doesn't impact the budget of any local school as we're state funded. Our executive offices are in Exeter, New Hampshire, but our instructors are distributed all over the state, and as well as about 8 additional states outside of New Hampshire. As of June of this year, we have grown to about 22,000 enrollments, and we're pretty proud of that because we're such a small state. If we take a look at the breakdown, about 2/3 of those enrollments are from public school students. About 1/4 are homeschool students. And the remaining percentage is made up of our full-time students, of which we have right now close to 180 and growing pretty quickly. Also other charter schools, private schools, and some students who have dropped out and are over the age of 18 years old. Just advance here. As I mentioned, our instructors come from a lot of different states. All of them are New Hampshire certified, but by that we just kind of make use of the reciprocal agreement that I believe 30 or 40 states have signed, and so it's really more paperwork than anything. So when we have an instructor come from New York State, they fill out the paperwork and become certified in New Hampshire. The training process for all of our instructors takes about 16 weeks before they get any significant number of students. And then at that point they move from a mentor to our formal evaluation process and formal supports. And then we start usually adding students in 10 student increments to get them up to whatever load they're looking for. We have both adjunct and full-time instructors. The number one thing that we believe in and that we push in all phases of our work is that relationships are the most important things that we do to ensure a high quality learning environment. So our instructors spend a lot of one-on-one time with our students. We don't have a calendar. We don't have a set pace for any of our courses. So students are moving through at a pace that meets their needs. So that means if they're in Algebra 1, which typically is designed to be a 36-week course, if they want to complete it in 10 weeks and they're motivated and talented and they want to do that, they can. If they need 40 weeks, they can do that as well. The expectation is, though, that they are always in contact with an instructor and that they are always working. The intent is not to allow a student to work for 2 weeks, take 2 weeks off, and so on and so forth. One of the interesting things that we found is that for the large percentage of instructors who work for us and work in traditional public schools, is they feel that their relationships are deeper with their online students than they are with their face-to-face students. And I think that's mainly because they deal, in most cases, one-to-one with their students. We're a competency-based school and working on a lot of programs to take advantage of that. And when we talk about competency-based, we say that our standards are fixed, but the time is really variable. And I already alluded to that when I said we don't have a school calendar. There's never a time-based unit, so a student doesn't have to complete a specific assignment by, say, this Friday. They move on when they become competent. And they can repeat tasks until they get to a level of competency. That doesn't mean it's always the same assessment or the same project, but they can continue to work toward a competency. They never get to a point where they fail a competency. There's always the opportunity to continue to work toward meeting it. And because of that, we always say that failure is not acceptable. And the way we explain that or illustrate that is to say, in a traditional academic setting, I know this type of thing happened to me when I was in high school, is you'd go through a certain unit, say in algebra or biology, and you just didn't get it. And so you got a low grade on it, and basically you just accepted that and say, okay, I want to be a good student, so what I need to do is average a 90 or better on the next couple of tests so that I can make up for that poor test. But what really happened was I had a deficiency in that one area. And so in a competency-based school, at least the way we look at it, is we say that's not an option. You have to continue working till you meet that competency. You can't just say, I want to let it go, let's move on, and I'll make up for it elsewhere. And we feel because of that many times that it's a more rigorous system than a time-based system. Also, we're moving away from the idea that courses are the only way to learn, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. And when we're rating students' work, usually we'll use a 3-point scale, which would be approaching competency, competent, and then exceeds competency. This graphic is our attempt at showing what we're working on. We're a year ago, we received a grant from Next Generation Learning Challenge grant folks to completely rebuild our school. We've always had courses available, competency-based courses. So in this diagram, you see learning through courses. To the right of that, you see learning through projects. Under that, learning through college, and then bottom left is learning through experience. And what we're getting very close to rolling out is allowing a student to jump between any of these or combine any of these options in the 4 upper or lower quadrants. So for example, that means that through learning through projects, we have a set of real-world projects that are designed to meet competencies in each of our courses. Also, we have with LT Experience, learning through experience, the opportunity for a student to design their own learning environment where they could go out and participate in an internship and say, through my internship at a local newspaper, I'm going to be building competency, say, toward a English competency. We would agree what the evidence of that would be, and then they would bring it back to us to show us that they had met that competency, and then we would basically say that they had met that competency. And we also have learning through college, where students can take 1 or more individual college courses. They can complete an entire year of college, or they can complete an associate's degree by the end of their senior year. So with all 4 of those working, and we're still a number of months away from having all 4 of these working, they can meet competencies in each of those areas, and then we can package them, and that's what the center graphic is showing. We can package them into a traditional unit, say like English 1 or English 2 or whatever it may be at the high school level, and then present that on the transcript, which they can transfer back to their regular school if they would like to. This is just a little more detailed list of the student opportunities and some of the places we're headed. Anything that's grayed out is something that is not yet available to students. You'll see under middle school, we have both full-time and part-time option, and the full-time option is brand new to us, and we're accepting applications for the first time. We've always had middle school students, but only on a part-time basis. So we expect to see easily 100 or 2 students in the next few months coming there. All of our full-time students will have an advisor and participate in an advisory program while they're a full-time student with us. At the high school level, you can see some of the things here I already mentioned, the learning through projects and so forth, and the advisory program that we have at the high school level. And then some of the things we're looking at are distributed learning teams, where students of various of the same interest might work on a common project, but geography doesn't matter. For example, it could be an environmental project. They may be testing, say, the groundwater in their local area, but combine results across an entire state or region to see, if there are some things they might find from that. This is an example of a potential one. Competency-based diploma, we're working on software there so that it can be totally interactive, so that not only can students see the competencies that they've mastered, but then at any point they can click down through either the course groupings or the competency and see the work that they've done. And then we also want to look at things like awarding badges for certain areas of study, especially where students can jump from competency to competency. We have the early college in place. We're also working to have a college certificate in computer science, and then we expect as we go into the winter here that we'll be opening adult education opportunities up for our people in New Hampshire and outside of New Hampshire. As far as research goes, I mentioned that we're a Next Generation Learning Challenge Grant recipient. They've hired the Iran Corporation to do quite a bit of research right now, connected mainly with all those projects. And they're looking for some very specific things. They want to see how much growth a student makes academically as they participate in these new programs. They're hoping to see a year and a half worth of growth in a single year. They're also going to disaggregate by socioeconomic status, by special ed needs, those types of things. And also they have been surveying our staff as well as our students to see how they view what we're doing and how that's changing things. I think going beyond that, there are a number of areas that would help us research-wise. And one is, what are the attributes of a successful VLACS instructor? We think we know. We have a pretty intensive supervision program, and we have a staff of people who work on an ongoing basis with our staff to conduct walkthroughs, to look at the data that's being generated, to talk to students, those types of things. So through that type of experience, we have what we think is a pretty good set of indicators that helps us to know that an instructor is successful. But I think if someone were really to press us and say, show us the hard evidence of that, it becomes a bit more difficult. I think, like a lot of virtual schools, we collect tons and tons of data, but it would take quite a bit of time and effort to probably make sense of that data. So any help we could get there would be greatly appreciated. Also, I mentioned before about our emphasis on relationships, and I really think it would be a very interesting exercise to find out how those relationships really influence students and what difference it makes in their lives. They feel that there's a real connection with this online teacher. Again, anecdotally, we hear about that all the time, that my teacher was great, that I really got to know my teacher, those types of things, but we don't have any hard, conclusive data. And then I think this is probably similar with some of the things that Rhonda was mentioning. What practices are associated with effective online learning in our model? So we again can identify a lot of things that instructors are doing, but is there something that is really common across all of our instructors, or across all that we can somehow identify as being most successful, that we can use as training for other instructors? And then are there common reasons why students don't complete in our online model? We have a similar completion rating to the one that Rhonda mentioned. We call it the student success rate, and this year we were at 89.7. And as you get closer and closer to 100, it gets harder and harder, of course, to make movement there. So we know that we're really starting to run into some barriers for how we can continue to make improvement. But it's hard to figure out exactly why some students aren't completing. Certainly we get data on, or we're beginning to collect data on things like, was it the courseware itself? Was it the technology? Was it that you really wanted to do something face-to-face? But again, this is data we're collecting. We haven't had time to analyze it. I think it would be really helpful. And then I think just in general, you can see all the new programs that are coming online. I think I don't have specific questions for each of those, but of course we want to be able to measure success in each of those areas. And I think, as competency-based education seems to be gaining a foothold, that there's probably a lot of fertile ground there for a number of different research projects that I haven't thought of that perhaps others might be interested in. So I think that's what I have at this point. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Steve. That was very informative. Sounds like you guys are in a pretty unique situation there in New Hampshire. If anyone has any questions for Steve or Rhonda, please feel free to type them into the chat box. We'll give a couple seconds there for anyone to do that. And in the meantime, I'll go ahead and cover our last two slides, and we'll provide our presenters some opportunity to address any questions that come through afterward. We just wanted to remind everyone about our upcoming webinar, which the next one will be Thursday, December 18th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be the third in this four-part series where we will hear from some more representatives from different virtual schools. They'll tell us about their own unique research needs within their settings. Thursday, we'll be joined by our very own Catherine Kennedy from the Michigan Virtual University, Amy Michalowski from the Virtual High School, and a Liz Colbert from North Carolina Virtual Public School. And finally, if you're interested in keeping up with us, if you'd like to be added to our email list, please feel free to shoot us an email at mvlri@mivu.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. All of these webinars are recorded, and we will be posting these webinars to our YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is not linked there, but I'm going to throw that link into the chat window. So if anyone has any questions or any feedback for us on the webinar process in general, or is just seeking out some additional questions or have any additional questions for us, please feel free to reach out to us and provide us with those questions and feedback. I'll open the floor for questions now for a little bit and be closing the meeting soon. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope everyone has a great day.